I don't know why my messages turned green in the group chat.
I know, I know
Did
this
it?
stuff.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
It's absolutely brutal. Look like I have an Android.
Hey,
We
that
can
phone
start off
bill,
with that. If you text someone and it's a green, is that a red flag for you? Will you trust them as
100%.
much?
Like from a business standpoint, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. You need the iPhone to do business. Like, you're already starting off on the wrong foot if you have
I feel
a
like
green
that's like a
message.
marketing lesson 101 right there is like Apple making that green on purpose just so they can like, I don't even know the word, but bully
It's
Android
like
users.
they made it exclusive, which increased the value. Cool. Well, episode one, I'm super glad that you're here, bro, that you made time. I think that once the guys get to know you, you'll have a ton of value to add. And yeah, I think I'll just give a quick rundown on like the motivation behind this, and then we'll get into your story because you've done some pretty impressive things. And yeah, we'll get into that more later. But as far as MOG Squad, what are we trying to accomplish? The Bible tells us that iron sharpens iron, just as a man sharpens another man. And I think we're so online these days and everyone's so interconnected and we think that we're connecting with people. But what I have found is like, I'm not actually connecting with people. I'm more so just like consuming content. But that's an algorithm that's trying to get me addicted and is trying to just tell me things I already know, right? Because it's confirmation bias. So what I want is to have conversations that I can grow from and I can learn from other people from instead of just being like a passive consumer. And so, there's all those sayings about your network is your net worth and you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And Proverbs also says that a true friend sticks closer than a brother. And you have been one of my closest friends since birth. So we're 11 months apart. We are cousins. And yeah, I don't even know where I'd be or who I'd be without Cam. Me and him just going at it as kids, wrestling, hanging up shirts in his dad's wrestling gym. We'll get into that, but his dad is an entrepreneur as well, owns a very successful clothing brand. You guys would all recognize the logo. So yeah, like I'm already weird and enough. So I can't imagine how weird I'd be if I didn't have you as a kid to roll around with and wrestle with. So, yeah, this is my cousin Cam. This guy has quite an impressive resume at 20. What are you, 24 now?
20,
Yeah, but a lot of your accomplishments happened at 23. So you beat me to getting married. You were a collegiate athlete, which is super impressive. You transferred to UGA, got a finance degree. So I think that shows your dedication on both sides of, athletics and academics. You also had you built a business with a partner. You have successfully exited a business at the age of 23, maybe 24, but you just accomplished a lot. And so I know you'll have a lot of valuable lessons to share with these guys. And so I just want to set the framework and the foundation of the caliber of people that we have in this group and how valuable it's going to be to surround yourself with those type of people. So with that, welcome Mr. Cameron Kawa to the MOG Squad podcast.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad I get to kick us off as our first episode. We got the recording rolling and hope we can all kind of build off each other and give each other lessons that we've learned along the way. And hopefully we can grow this group to even more than where it's at. So happy to be here.
Yeah, bro. So why don't we start with sort of your influences in your upbringing, because you kind of have a unique upbringing and set of influences that I think might have led you to business, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'd love to hear your story there on like, when did you have an interest in business? What influences led you there along the way?
Yeah, well, you already mentioned probably my biggest influence, which is my dad, who's been a serial entrepreneur his whole life. So having somebody who you grow up around and kind of see them walk through that process and see them be successful. And then I think certainly gave me the confidence to make that leap when I decided to. My dad's a risk taker, and he's incredibly resourceful in what he does. And I was very much entrenched in the process of him building the business really from the start until now. And he's grown incredibly since. So to be able to see him walk through that process again gave me the confidence to make that jump myself. But it also taught me a bunch of different things, just how to be tough, how to communicate with people. He came from a wrestling background, so just like that fighter mentality in business or in life, and really just not backing down to challenges and things like that. So definitely my motivation there, and really come from a family of entrepreneurs who have been through a similar process in a bunch of different fields. So just to see how different personalities can also be successful in business I don't think one personality is just like the ticket to success, but I've been able to pull from a bunch of different personalities in my life, and ultimately all of which have poured into me being successful in starting my business and selling my business. I don't think there's one personality that we all have to replicate. I think there's a lot of things you can learn from successful people in your life, and I'm fortunate. My dad was one of those, and other members of my family who are operating in business that I've learned from as well. So that's kind of my upbringing, definitely entrenched in what my dad was doing. Got to see everything firsthand from his wrestling gym to making the transition over to the apparel world, and seeing him grow and scale that. And he was a huge influence in me starting my business and walking me through kind of the a process of selling it, which is a totally new world that a lot of people don't understand and has a lot of complexities too.
I'm sure, bro. I mean, yeah, you look at Wall Street, some of their biggest deals are they just get a commission off a massive merger and acquisition. But there's a book that I really like. It's called Steal Like an Artist. And it's super interesting because, like you said, you don't have to like replicate one exact person. So many people are out here giving advice online, and it's like, no one's path is going to be the exact same. And so instead of trying to do exactly what someone else did, the concept of Steal Like an Artist is like, take a group of people who inspire you and take what you like about each of their forms of art. Music would be a classic example. Like, tons of different artists and rappers, like they were inspired by a collection of different musicians growing up. It could have been a wide range, like Post Malone. His dad was actually a DJ. So he grew up listening to like the widest variety of music possible. And you see that in his own style, where he's such a blend of, pop and rap, and even he's dabbling in country now. But I love that you can take little bits and pieces from other people, but then make it your own style. And so I guess I would just ask though, are there any common traits that you see amongst successful entrepreneurs? Since you said you've been around multiple and maybe they have different personalities, but what are the common traits that you might have seen that just run parallel?
One that sticks out to me is entrepreneurs never seem satisfied with the work they're doing. There's always something else they're chasing and building. I think that 9 to 5 lifestyle probably fits for somebody's personality who wants to be comfortable, but entrepreneurs are always looking to jump to the next thing. So just kind of that relentless pursuit of what's next. A mentor of mine now, my boss now, he's another entrepreneur, and he just has this relentless drive to go to the next thing and not just be content with the business he's built, but like he's always looking for new opportunities. He's always saying yes. He's not afraid to fail. Something about that personality to, take the initial jump. And when you're successful, don't be satisfied in the success you've had, but constantly looking for that next thing. And that comes with a lot of things. Like I said, not being scared to fail, but also the resourcefulness to navigate things you haven't done before, and then having the confidence in yourself that you can actually go out and accomplish that next thing. If I had to put it in one sentence, I would just say like the relentlessness to pursue something else that's kind of uncharted territory, even when you don't have to. A lot of entrepreneurs are really successful. I mean, you could ask them like, why don't you just cash out and like go to the beach for the rest of your life, or play golf the rest of your life, whatever it is. But like the best entrepreneurs like never say no to the next opportunity, and they go at that opportunity as hard as the first one. And I saw something today about it was a college basketball coach, and he was mentoring a new college basketball coach who was going to coach in the national championship. And he said, regardless of the outcome of the game, the day of the championship is going to be the worst day of your life, because you're either going to lose and you're going to work every single day to try to get back to that point, or you're going to win and you can't get enough of that feeling, and you're going to chase that feeling over and over again. I feel like that's what entrepreneurs have, is that gene of like, even when they're successful, like they're going to keep chasing that feeling over and over and over again. And you can feel it from them, like in meetings, you can feel it from them in life. It's just like that crazy, relentless drive. Like they're not going to stop. So, and I've seen that in a lot of really hyper successful entrepreneurs.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like it's so glamorized these days. Entrepreneurship is the cool thing to do, but I feel like that's the side people don't see. Like, yeah, you might not want to work a 9 to 5, but a lot of people quit their 9 to 5 just to go work way longer, way harder, but it's something that lights them up inside, and they truly are always on a path to keep growing. And I like what you said about like they're never comfortable. Were there times when, or what are some times when you really had to go outside of your comfort zone, and what did that teach you? Because I feel like comfort is such a silent killer of progress. Like you can work your 9 to 5, you can come home, you can be happy, and yeah, that's great. But if you're not growing when you're in that mentality and when you're in that season, so what are some times where you really had to like step into the unknown, push out of your comfort zone, and what did you gain from that? Because I feel like there's a lot to gain too on that edge of the known and the
Yeah, I feel like talking a little bit about my career path here is probably going to be helpful. Just context.
for sure. Yeah.
I started with the company I'm currently with back in 2021. They were a relatively new company in the event space. Their basic model was we would contact professional athletes who wanted to host youth camps, like 1 day youth camps. And then we would handle all the back end logistics of that. So like the marketing, the on-site registration, things like sponsorships, and actually running the day of show. So I stepped into that role, was in like a super heavy operations role, was traveling across the country, and really got to understand the model and how to run the events on site and kind of managing teams and being the point of contact for the athletes when they showed up, that sort of thing. And I was really comfortable in that role. I served in that role for 3 years, got a ton of reps, really learning the model, understanding kind of the flow, but also the back end of the business, some of the financials, things like that. And that's probably a lane I could have stayed in for a long time. And I'm sure I would have progressed in the company, but I feel like I would have been kind of always stuck at that level. Maybe I would have managed more teams, but I never would have been involved in more than what I was. And ultimately, because of that and some disagreements with management, I did take that step outside of being super comfortable. And that's why I started my own business. And I think in that process of starting my own company, which was a direct competitor to my former employer, I immediately became uncomfortable and I immediately had to learn things that I didn't know. And I was comfortable in my operations lane, but I didn't understand things like the finances behind the business or how to negotiate with the agents to get better deals or the accounting, the books of running a business and all the things that you don't consider. I knew the on-site
hmm
stuff, but I threw myself into the small business owner position and I had to learn everything in the business. So um, that's my best example of like having to take that leap. And anybody who's started a company before knows that when you have such a small operation, the owners of the business do everything and you have to kind of learn everything quickly or it doesn't get done. You can't delegate because you can't afford a staff to do it yourself. So I'm glad I made that jump. Looking back on it, it paid off and that risk was certainly worth it. But I had to take that jump from my comfortable role in an operations lead that I knew exactly what to do. I knew what to expect, threw myself into the small business owner role, and I had to learn everything quickly. And then, long story short, we can get into it more, but I transitioned back to flex work and I've made a massive jump in my influence at the company. I'm now in charge of way more than if I would have just stayed on that operations role and kind of
Mm,
took a linear path. And the reason I'm in the position I am now and the role I can serve is because I wore all the hats at my company. At True Edge, I had to know sponsorships. I had to know the marketing. I had to know accounting, the finance behind it. And because I have knowledge in all those spaces, now I'm able to transition back at Flexwork. And I'm not just seen as the operations person, but I have influence over other parts of the company because I understand it. Because I had to force myself
mm.
to not be comfortable and understand the entire business as a whole versus being narrow-minded and just being comfortable in operations. So that was long-winded, but I think it speaks to your question.
No, that was great. Bro, there was so much in that. And something that really stood out was like you could have just stayed in that operations role and took like the linear path. And I think now more than ever, those type of linear people are more at risk, right? The person who just shows up, does the same thing over and over every single day. Those type of roles are the first ones that are getting automated by AI and things like that because you know one thing very well. You're like a super specialist in one area, but what you said about like you had to jump off and learn every aspect of the business, and now that makes you such a more valuable asset. So I want to ask, like, what would you say to somebody who is in that specialist role, who maybe wants to be a generalist and they like maybe they've they've done research about like the finance and the accounting side and the marketing, and they think they know because they've like watched videos about it. But like, how different is it when you really jump in, and like, will you ever be able to learn as much from just like watching videos and like learning conceptually, like out of a book, like in college? Or like, how much more did you learn from really just jumping in and doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the only way to do it. It's like anyone who went to school, high school or college, you understand that like just because you learn something in the classroom, you may learn the X's and O's behind it, but the actual real world application could be totally different. And also in business, you may be taught like the general idea of something, but also like the application to your specific field could look totally different. So yeah, I mean, that's why you have to make that jump, because you have to learn by failing a couple times by trying things, right? And that's exactly what we did. And over 2 years, we built our business and we failed at a bunch of things, from how to run a paid ad spend like Meta account to learning QuickBooks and things like that. I took accounting classes, but I had no idea how to operate QuickBooks because, we didn't get taught QuickBooks specifically in school. We got taught general accounting principles, but the actual
Mm.
application to our business is totally different. So you have to try it. You have to try the very specific task that you need to accomplish either in your job or in your small business. But yeah, you absolutely have to get that real world application down, because a lot of times that general knowledge doesn't get you very far.
Mm, yeah, I love that. It almost sounds like so many people, myself included, like have watched a bunch of business videos, and like that honestly gets counterproductive at a certain point, because you really should only be learning when you're actually like faced with that problem and it's becoming an obstacle and it's right in front of you. Like, you can learn all the knowledge you want, but like if you never are taking steps and you're going on your own path down the road, and you're encountering an obstacle, like that's when you need to learn. And that's when you do learn the best, like through experience. So that's a huge lesson for me, is just like taking the action. And that's a big piece of what we're doing here, like starting a podcast, starting a networking group. Like, I don't know everything about it, but like, how am I ever going to learn if I don't just start? And
Right.
I have the people in my life who have done impressive things, who are doing impressive things, who are going to be successful and already are. And there's so much opportunity. Like, really where it stood out was on your bachelor party and my own, like getting all those groups of guys together, and just the amount of information and conversation that could happen. You'll never get that just by scrolling on social media or even following someone on Instagram, right? You have to be in the same room as these people. And, I plan on doing that in person with this group, but to start, like just meeting virtually is still a great way to meet and to get that real connection. So I really love that. So yeah, well, I have a question about running your business, and it's how important is, speaking of networking and groups and things like that, like you worked with a partner in your business. So I'm curious, like, how was that? And that also comes with a lot. So how important is having a partner in business?
In my situation, it was incredibly important. I think a lot of partnerships fail. I think the reason our business partnership worked is because we were very complementary. Will,
Mm.
my partner, his strengths were a lot of my weaknesses, and I would say vice versa. And we really fed off of each other. We shared a vision together. We both worked at Flexwork, the company we both started off, and we were able to break off together. And because we did break off together, we had the shared vision, and we knew the things that we wanted to kind of replicate that we liked at Flexwork, but we also knew things that we wanted to improve on. And I think because
Mm.
we shared that vision, we were able to grow the business together. We also aligned morally, which I think is big. When you're starting a business with somebody, there's a lot of big decisions financially that can come up. You think of like taxes and how you treat your customers, and there's so many decisions that go into being a business owner, that I feel like being aligned morally with your business partner is so important. And it's, I think, a lot of reasons why people break off and partnerships don't work. But yeah, it was always good to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, to debate things with, to just kind of come around and share ideas, and also just build something together. Just having more hands and more people thinking about the business, he would catch things that I didn't see. I had insights and opinions on things that he didn't care about. So in my case, it worked
Hmm.
out really well, and I'm glad we started it together. And now we're continuing to work together in our new jobs. But it's been productive, and I think our partnership probably speaks to something bigger, is like having resources to be able to go to talk about things. And especially when you're building a business, my dad was a resource to me in like the financial areas and sales and negotiations and things like that. So being able to have those resources is great. I also think groups like this are awesome just for unique perspectives on situations and um, you know, news and like current up to date things and like technology. AI is changing things so quickly. So to just have more people who you trust and rely on and hear their unique
Mhm.
perspectives on like the world is great. And just you can't read all the headlines, but if you have a core group of guys who you really trust and can go to when you have questions about things in your business or your work to go to, I think that's great. And it's awesome to be part of a community like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, having a partner like can be risky, but so many of the things that you gain, like just two different minds attacking the same issues. And like you said, y'all both saw things that you really liked about your old company, and then you both saw things you wanted to improve on. So that shared vision. And also one thing that I think is super underrated, but you talked about like the shared ethics part of it and or shared morals. And
Yep.
so I want to ask like how important is your faith in the way that you do business and how do you kind of integrate those things? Yeah, how do you integrate faith in business and what does that look like? Because after all, this is a Christian businessmen group. It's called MOG Squad, Man of God. Like I think that's so crucial to having a group of men who you can trust, like you said, who you can bounce ideas off of, and more importantly, have a shared vision and shared moral framework.
Right.
So I'm just curious, like, what's your take on that, and um, how do you integrate those two things?
It's huge. We learned really quickly running a business, everything revolves around money. And when money's involved, people's allegiances and morals like come out very quickly, right? And
Mm,
if you're not aligned on how you treat other people, your customers, your business colleagues, other businesses you do business with, things are just going to go rail quickly. And I think if you're not rooted in faith, it's really easy to say, I'm making this decision for the benefit of my company. I'm making this decision for the benefit of my own personal finances. And it doesn't matter the effect that it has on my customer or this business colleague. And you could just quickly go down this road of saying it's okay to lie and steal and cheat and avoid taxes or not refund this customer. You know, you can go down whatever rabbit hole you want, but to be aligned
mm,
on that with your business partner is huge because no matter what business you're in, it's driven by money. And if you're not aligned on making those decisions together, it can go off the rails quickly. And I think you see it with a lot of people that they can justify it because they have to pay their bills or they have to provide for their family.
mm,
And of course, that is something they have to do. Admirable for them to get into business for those reasons. But when they do it to sacrifice others, then, that's a whole different story. And it's a dangerous
mm.
path to go down.
100%. I mean, I think just on a broad scale, you look at society and you see we're kind of living in the results and the impact of what I would call like compounded greed over several generations and decades, right? In
Right.
America, we're seeing things like just healthcare costs skyrocketing, just because the insurance industry, they can basically charge whatever they want and it's got to get paid somehow, putting cheap chemicals and fillers in food at the expense of other people's health or selling addictive substances that harm people, but they make you a lot of money. Like, I think we're just living in such a end result of that. And you look around and you see how broken things are. And yeah, it's just heartbreaking. So I really love that you guys were able to do that because I mean, the Bible's very clear. You can't serve two masters, specifically money and God. God, Jesus knew that those are really probably going to be the last two things that are fighting for that seat in your heart. Like that's one thing that gives the Bible such credibility to me is it's timeless. Like this was written thousands of years ago and it still applies arguably even more than ever right now to today.
Yeah.
There's no other book that could do that. And yeah, it's so true that when money is involved, people start acting weird and their true colors show. So, man, that's so important. And again, that's one of the reasons why like this group we're going to focus on like conquering our flesh, conquering lust because that's also a big one. I think those go hand in hand a lot of times like when you can lust for power, it's really just any desire that's enthroned improperly over God. And it's a battle too, right? You need that accountability factor of guys who are going to check in on you and ask how you're doing. Man, that's just super powerful. Awesome. So what would you say to someone who the advice that's like follow your passion in business? What would you say about that?
You can follow your passion if there's like profit on the other side of it. I would say I think passions will burn out quickly if you realize that you can't dedicate all your time to it. And if you are dedicating all your time to it, if you're losing a bunch of money, it's probably not worth it. I do think you should do something that interests you and keeps you engaged. Oftentimes, I found what keeps you engaged is probably what's making you the most money, but that's probably pretty blunt. But you can absolutely follow your passions, but it's got to be supported by uh, probably some sort of financial earning for you to stick with it and at least give the time and effort needed to be successful.
Yeah, that's so true. Because even like you said, like when you start a business, you're now dealing with every piece of the business. So sales, marketing, finances. And so maybe you are passionate about personal training or about sports, about youth sports even, but that's not what you're going to be doing for most of the time,
Yeah,
arguably. So
absolutely.
yeah, I really like more what you said about just following your interests and what's going to keep you engaged because a lot of times, like, to get an outsized return, it's gonna take a lot of focus and a lot of effort over a sustained period of time, and so, if you're just kind of really passionate about one thing and then it fades, and then you're really passionate about the next thing, and then the next thing, it's like you never really make it far enough down the road to see that outsized return and success.
Yeah. I think one thing I'd say on that is like if you're passionate about something great, and if there's a business model that supports it, awesome. But like go find somebody else who is doing it. Everybody's always trying to come up with like the next great idea and that nobody's doing. And like in 20 years from now, sure, we're gonna look back and be like, wow, how did I not think of that idea? But I think a lot of people miss the mark trying to find the next great thing that's not out there. It's like find something you're passionate about. Go find somebody who's already doing it and doing it well and making money from it. And then you go develop something, but with your own insights and with your own passions kind of influenced into that. Like somebody has
Mm.
your same interests and your same passions, like go find their business. You can replicate that, make it your own, and make certain aspects of that better. Kind of, I probably say that because my process was similar. I found something I was interested in, which was sports, professional and collegiate. Then I was able to kind of spin that idea off into something of my own and make the certain aspects of my business better than the last, right? So if you're passionate about something great, that's fine. Go find a business model that's already in place and then try to make it your own.
That's so good. Yeah. So you're basically saying like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to start completely from scratch. M- most people aren't going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Elon Musk. Yeah, it would be great to be competing in a wide open blue ocean, but that's really just not realistic for 99.999% of people. So I feel like that's a big takeaway is there's people making money all around you doing pretty simple things that just need to be done. Like one of the richest people I ever worked for just owned a simple commercial cleaning business. So they would come in, they'd send crews to like every car dealership, restaurants, office buildings, and hey, it's just recurring contract revenue that stacks up over time. So and it's not glorious, but it pays very well. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. Like, yeah, sure, follow your passion, but you got to make sure there's a business model that actually generates profit as well. It's a good answer. What's something that's particularly hard about business that people might not understand or foresee when they're kind of starting out the journey?
I think you hinted to it a little bit before. It's like when you start a business, you think you're going to be doing one thing, and that's typically whatever your core model is, but you end up doing all the other things that pulls you away from that core. And one thing that's tough about that one is you realize very quickly that you're actually not doing the thing that you got into the business for. So that's one. But also when you're starting a business, your core business model that you write out on a napkin. For me, and maybe it's best explained by an example. My core business model was sign an athlete. If it costs me $10 to sign an athlete, I have to have registrations and sponsorships to cover that athlete's cost plus um, profit on top of that $10. in order for me to be a successful business. Pretty simple model, right? So athlete
Mm-hmm.
costs, registration, sponsorships coming to subsidize that, and I have to make more than that athlete cost to be a profitable business. So like that's my core model. But what you realize pretty quickly, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, is you don't account for all the other expenses that go into a business.
Mm-hmm.
Building out a website, advertising, staffing the events, insurance is a big one. I've already talked about accounting and having, if you outsource that to somebody else, doing that, just paying your taxes, having a CPA. So I think one thing that people don't understand, a lot of entrepreneurs fail, is they have a
Mm.
great business model on the napkin at first and the core model, and it makes a lot of sense. And the path seems like super linear on how to be successful, but then you forget to factor in all the other pieces that go into building a business. And all your time and energy is sucked into those other pieces that you kind of lose sight of the core model. And then you're behind financially, or you can't figure out other pieces of the business, and it just takes away from that core model. So to get back to your question, I think one thing that's difficult for entrepreneurs is seeing the big picture and not just being so narrow on that napkin on the piece of paper with your core model, but also being able to execute and plan for all the other expenses and difficulties outside of just whatever your original idea is.
Yeah, I've heard Alex Hormozy say profit is not natural. So when you're starting a business, the gross margin might be good, right? Like you sign an athlete, registrations and sponsorships. Wow, this math looks great. But
Right.
that's not your net profit margin,
Right.
which, hey, these are actually accounting and finance terms. Maybe college was useful in some way.
Yeah.
But that net profit is especially just unnatural. So too many business owners, they'll replace their old job with another full-time job where they're working harder, maybe even for less money, right? So yeah, profit is unnatural. So all that means though is that you have to be even more relentless and hold the line as the business owner. You have to be ruthless with cutting costs, and it's hard. Business is hard, but given that it's hard and it's almost very competitive, like did you find that you were using your competitive nature in business at all?
Yeah, for sure. One, leaving my old company and starting my other, I always felt like I was competitive against them because they were always coming after super strong. So like it was always a competition against them.
Mm,
Anytime it's rare that you find a market that's totally untapped and you're not competing with other businesses. So it was a comparison game of all the other camp companies out there, whether it was website or operations or Google reviews and your Google rating and what you showed up there. But absolutely, I think I was super competitive in the business, and that that's what drove me because it was kind of an extension of athletics, and you play sports your whole life. And I think it's the one thing now where you can kind of transfer that competitive nature over to in business, and growing up an athlete certainly goes hand in hand.
What do you think was your separating factor at True Edge? Like, what was your competitive edge that really allowed you guys to stand out over, like you said, all the other competition?
Our operation was super lean. Our team was small, and that was a disadvantage, but it's probably more an advantage than it was a disadvantage. It's a disadvantage because we weren't able to scale and do 500 events, but we did 24 events over 2 years. And what that allowed us to do was have a really elite operation, that there was a lot of attention to detail to from like a customer
Hmm.
facing side. So our on-site operation was super smooth from check-in to the drills we were running at camp to how we communicated with parents through email and through text. And when they sent in emails to like our customer service, like how fast we were able to get back to them. I think that's ultimately like why we had the success we were able to, is because we didn't like come out the gates trying to do 300 events. Like we just focused on
Hmm.
24 over 2 years, and we tried to host the best events we could in that 2 year period. Our operation was lean. It was a small team, but it was like a small, dedicated team that really had a lot of attention to detail and was able to move quick, solve problems quickly. You hear about companies going corporate and everything just gets really slow. And part of that is
Hmm.
like they become really big and there's so many different levels of things to get done that like something, if it starts here, it's got to go through 5 levels till it's complete. Like sometimes that's an advantage to small business because like one person in the business may own 3 different departments and you can get stuff done really quick and make decisions quick. So we were light on our feet, super lean, and we're able to problem solve and I really put on a really great customer facing product at the end of the day, which helped us a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, contrast that with kind of me working a corporate job at the moment. It's like it's brutally slow. And it also deals with the incentives because, you know, incentives are so important, right? So when someone's working hourly at McDonald's, like they don't care if your burger's right or wrong because they're making the same minimum wage or $10 an hour
Right.
as if they're churning out 500 burgers or one burger on time, right? So incentives are so important, and I think that's a big issue with corporations and bureaucracy is like it's the same concept. People are incentivized to do as little work as possible to not get fired, and contrast that with entrepreneurship where you're incentivized to get the most done, deliver the best result with the fewest resources possible. So it's just that dichotomy of like if small businesses run super lean and way more efficient than a big, slow moving bureaucracy. And I think that's a principle that I tend to apply to a lot of areas. Like, you know, I think many people would benefit from like even smaller government, more decentralized companies, more decentralization where you give more autonomy back to the people because that's when you can be lean and efficient and somebody genuinely cares about the problem and the product rather than I'm just here because, I'm getting paid and I get paid the same whether your problem gets solved or not. And like you said, I think that is an advantage that you can have in the competition realm is like genuinely caring about giving a good customer experience because a lot of times the bar is on the floor. So, that's part of this podcast. I want to add as much value as possible to the guys in the group because, it's all about the experience. And that's also the only way you can grow exponentially is like through word of mouth. If I am blown away by something and I tell 3 of my friends and they tell 3 people and they tell 3 people, like that's way more exponential than like a linear ad spend, for example. So I totally agree. Awesome. All right. Any closing thoughts? I have one.
We covered a lot of ground. I think it's great. Now that I've worked both sides of things, I've been an employee, I've been an entrepreneur. I truly believe like people can be successful in both roles. Like I don't think people who aren't running a small business should be put down that they're in their 9 to 5. I think you can be influential in your 9 to 5. I think you could be learning and preparing yourself to potentially take a jump and go be a entrepreneur one day. I also don't think like every entrepreneur should be a business owner and they may be better off in a more structured systems. Like wherever you're at in your career, you very well could be preparing to make that jump, or you could very well, like I did, I went entrepreneur back into more of like corporate America. I kind of work for a small company now, but wherever you're at, know that you could be preparing yourself to make that next transition. So don't be discouraged with where you're at.
My last question was, are there any books that impacted your life or your worldview in a specific way that you would recommend?
Well, I think living in scripture is important. So not the cop out answer of read your Bible, but I think, like you said, scripture is timeless. And I think whatever situation you're in, it could be applicable to what you're doing. I do have a couple books I would recommend, and I'll send them in the group after. How about that? But a couple about small business. One specifically I read, and it was the core of the book was talking about how you get into business, and we already hit on this, so it's a good one. And I'm blanking on the name, or I'll share it, but it takes you away from what you get into, and you realize that you're actually being sucked away into the accounting, into the finance, into the marketing, and you get away from that core business model. But that was a good one. I finished that. I'll send it. I'm just blanking on the name right now, but that was a good one I've read.
Word. Well, just real quick. So at what point do you delegate as a business owner, or did you guys sell out before you had to really, really delegate too much?
We did delegate a little bit. I would definitely encourage business owners to delegate. Try not to delegate right away. And the longer you can push it off, the better. I say that because I go back to the point we were talking about earlier is you don't account for all the expenses that go into starting a business. And if you immediately start to delegate or outsource things, rather than just doing it yourself financially, I think it just puts you in a stressful position where your finances are always being strained to other people when you could save a lot of money to own it. I would delegate when the right people come along. That would be my answer. It's like if you delegate to the wrong person, somebody could really mess it up. So delegate when people come into your business, whether they come in voluntarily and they find you or you go out and find them, and you have trust in that person and they're rock stars at what you do, then you delegate. delegate it to them. When you
Hmm.
have faith in them, when you have prepared them to be successful in their role, that's when you delegate. But I think you have to own it first before you look to outsource anything. As a small business owner, you need to know your business. You don't have to be perfect at like everything you do as a small business owner, but I think you have to be knowledgeable about every aspect of the business, and then go out and find talent that aligns with your business mission and your goals and your morals that we spoke about, and put those people in a position to be successful. And delegation is good if you want to continue to grow, but you have to do it progressively and you have to do it with the right people.
Awesome, bro. Well, that puts us right at 45 minutes. That was absolutely fire. A lot of gems in here. Can't wait to share it with the guys. I'll try to possibly like get some clips out of this and we'll see where it goes. So really appreciate it.
Nice, bro. Way to lead it. That was great.
Awesome. All right, bro. We'll get together soon.